B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Thursday, March 12th, 2020. This podcast is dedicated to the memory of Mal Sharp. Mal was a talented man who graced the Bay Area until yesterday, and he's going to be deeply missed. He was a radio comic who did man-on-the-street interviews back in the 1960s and shared those with my listeners on talk radio in the 1990s. Mal also was a devoted jazz fan and jazz DJ. He fronted a jazz band that made fun of Dixieland, and he was a beloved figure, and we are going to deeply miss him. So last night, Trump went on TV from the Oval Office and gave one of those dreadful teleprompter speeches. And he announced that he is raising the drawbridge here at Fortress America, with some exceptions. And he stumbled through a scripted speech where he was forced to acknowledge the risks of the pandemic. And while he won't admit the slow response, basically he ignored it during the critical early stages when we could have taken steps to reduce the rate of infection. And I want to begin with a story from the Washington Post today that accurately states, here's the headline: for Trump, the coronavirus crisis is all about the numbers, and they don't look good. Trump sees everything as being about him. And so it's not just the numbers that he's worried will make him look bad, but he wants to control the optics. And yesterday at the White House, they imposed security controls on all of the meetings related to the response to the pandemic. That shows you that his whole approach is about protecting himself politically and not protecting you, me, and Joe Sixpack. The Post article reads, Trump's obsession with numbers, both publicly and privately, has dominated and shaped the administration's response, as advisors and public health experts try to placate a leader who largely views the global pandemic through the political lens of how the statistics reflect on his presidency and hopes for re-election. He wants market numbers up, and he wants case numbers down. Well, he can't talk the market back into the black. We have hit a technical bear market. That's a drop of 20% in less than 3 weeks. And we're all feeling that pinch. Anybody who's got any money in the stock market, and that's where my retirement fund is, we're feeling a little poor or poorer these days. So Joe Biden gave what I have accounts of as a reasonable speech from Delaware today. And he gave a speech where he began by saying, we will lead with science. We need to surge our capacity in prevention, treatment of coronavirus. We need to prepare our hospitals for the influx of expected patients. We have been saying this for weeks. And one of my online friends did a calculation and said, we're running, 3 to 4 weeks behind the pattern in Italy. And so you can expect the reported cases to continue to jump. And we are not within range of the peak infection rates here in the United States so far. And from what I've read, Biden didn't stumble in this speech. He managed to be fairly coherent. The administration's failure on testing is colossal, and it's a failure of planning, leadership, and execution. By next week, the number of tests should be in the millions, not the thousands. The former VP unveiled a comprehensive plan for handling the crisis, calling for a response that ensures free and widely available testing, the development of a vaccine, emergency paid leave for all Americans affected by the outbreak, and an immediate set of ambitious and progressive economic measures and further decisive action to address the larger macroeconomic shock from this outbreak. Bernie Sanders is delivering a speech about the time that I'm speaking to you today in Burlington, Vermont, and we will update you on his commentary tomorrow. I want to thank listener and contributor Linda Lewis. She has volunteered to help me out every day with a brief summary of the coronavirus news. And Linda, I really appreciate it. This is from her first dispatch today. As of March 12th, the case count in the United States is 1,215 with 36 deaths. 42 states and the District of Columbia are reporting cases so far. Dr. Anthony Fauci today, he told the House Oversight Committee the testing system is failing. The idea of anybody getting it easily, the virus, the way people in other countries are doing it, we're not set up for that. Do I think we should be? Yes, but we're not. Oh, I guess that was a reference to testing. I'm sorry, not to the caseload. And also CDC Director Robert Redfield told the committee on Tuesday, the truth is we are underinvested in the public health labs. There's not enough equipment, not enough people, not enough internal capacity, and there's no search capability. Now, in the speech last night from the Oval, Trump announced a travel ban to the U.S. from 26 countries. But it is not based on, the epidemiology, because he has he's given an exception to the United Kingdom, where there are over 400,000 cases already. So we'll dive into that here in a moment. The Treasury Department has announced it'll grant a 3-month tax holiday to individuals, small and mid-sized businesses. The SBA, Small Business Administration, will offer low-interest loans. Some individuals and businesses will be allowed to defer tax payments, and Trump is urging Congress to pass payroll tax reductions. A lot of these, require much more detail. How does this tax holiday work? And helping businesses, I can understand that during this time, but I think the priority should be on the human beings and working people. So one of the issues here is that Trump's travel ban excludes countries where he has golf courses. Would he be that petty? Would he be that self-interested? That he would believe that this travel ban would protect Americans, but allowing people to come in through Britain? And we don't know if that's limited to British citizens or residents, or if they have to wait 14 days before they can travel. There are a whole lot of details that we need much more information on. So it's an untimely recess on Capitol Hill, or maybe it is timely, because Congress is trying to pass a relief package, but they are rushing because they have announced that starting today, the U.S. Capitol, House, and Senate office buildings will be closed to the public at least until April 1st. One of the other curiosities here is we get almost a daily report of people testing positive for coronavirus who have been in close contact with the orange monster, Donald Trump. So last weekend at Mar-a-Lago, it wasn't an official diplomatic visit, but the right-wing monster who runs Brazil these days, Jair Bolsonaro, was visiting, and his press secretary has tested positive. Bolsonaro apparently not so far. But the press secretary shook hands with Trump and with Vice President Pence, we are told. And Trump says he's not concerned. Okay. You don't have to be. So over on Capitol Hill, the House prepared to vote on a sweeping coronavirus relief package that would include food security assistance, a substantial national paid sick leave program, free coronavirus testing, and strengthened unemployment benefits for people affected by the pandemic. Now, this package was hastily cobbled together, unveiled late on Wednesday night. Speaker Pelosi spoke 3 times by phone on Thursday morning with the Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who's leading negotiations for the White House, and we will see if a package can be put together before this recess. But don't count on it, because Republicans and their Senate leader, Mitch McConnell, don't appear to be committed to many of the proposals of the Democrats. So in the speech, the word salad delivered from the Oval Office last night, Trump gave very confusing and misleading information. So, for example, here's a quote from Trump. "To keep new cases from entering our shores, we will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days. The new rules will go into effect Friday at midnight. These restrictions will be adjusted subject to conditions on the ground. There will be exemptions for Americans who have undergone appropriate screenings." So there are 26 nations, and they are described as part of a zone that I've never heard of before. It is a way of designating portions of Europe, and it doesn't really make sense to me to pick and choose, but that is what is being described here. But the exemption for the United Kingdom was added as kind of an afterthought. Trump also confused people by initially saying that these prohibitions will not apply to the tremendous amount of trade and cargo, but various other things as we get approval. So this has left people scratching their heads saying, what the hell does that mean? And Trump tried to clarify in a tweet, "Businesses should know that trade will in no way be affected by the 30-day restriction on travel from Europe. The restriction stops people, not goods." Now, Trump also said that insurance companies are waiving co-payments for the testing for the virus. Here's the quote. "Earlier this week, I met with leaders of the health insurance industry who have agreed to waive all co-payments for coronavirus treatments, extend insurance coverage to these treatments, and to prevent surprise medical billing." So he uses the word treatments. But the lobby group for the health insurance industry clarified that they would only be waiving costs for tests, not for treatment. So on the confusion about the effective date and who is covered by the travel ban, a New York Times reporter who was on vacation in Paris with his wife got a call from their daughter announcing that Trump has imposed this ban, and Trump said that it started on Friday at midnight. That has been clarified to say Saturday at midnight, which is actually Sunday morning. And as we were watching Trump last night, Kathy and I said, well, does he really mean midnight on Friday or midnight on Saturday? And this becomes important, because Mike McIntyre, the Times reporter, he and his wife had their original tickets for a flight back on Saturday. But when they learned that the deadline was midnight Friday, they scrambled. And they paid over $5,000 for 2 one-way tickets from Paris to New York. Then when they learned that they'd been misinformed by the President of the United States directly, they went to Charles de Gaulle Airport and tried to cancel the $5,000 plus tickets. But the line was impossibly long, and they tried over the phone every way they could to cancel those tickets. And ultimately, they swallowed hard. And he says, looking around at the growing chaos that seemed destined to intensify in the coming days, we swallowed hard and pulled out our gold-plated economy tickets. And one of the baggage people told him that somebody had paid $20,000. We don't know exactly how many tickets were involved, but clearly price gouging is happening as a result of this very arbitrarily imposed ban. There was no consultation with European authorities, and Trump protected his own businesses. Was that his intent by excluding the United Kingdom? I can't say that. But it's quite possible, knowing what we know about this guy. I want to thank listener Andrea Hegland, who emailed me a screenshot of a Twitter thread that was started by HuffPost reporter Michael Hobbs. He says, just went to Seattle's UW Medical Center to ask how much patients are being charged for a coronavirus test. $100 to $500 if they have insurance, $1,600 if they don't. But in response, somebody named Danny Eschini says, my test was $1,700 all said and done. I was required to get a full respiratory panel for various flus, pneumonia, etc. I applied for charity care. I literally am just finishing chemotherapy for lymphoma. And they hit him with an unexpected $1,700 bill. And it could be a female. Danny is spelled D-A-N-N-I, and I apologize for not knowing that person's gender. My friend Ford Green has an interesting theory that he posted on Facebook last night, and that is, as Trump is forced to cancel his mob rallies, the campaign rallies, and he has in Nevada and is planning to in Florida, Ford asks, is he going to run out of his supply of fawning people who feed his narcissism? And technically, it is called narcissistic supply. And Ford writes, if Trump's continued political viability becomes dependent on not conducting any further mass rally, the impact on his psychological and narcissistic viability is likely to become significant. Well, I like your idea there, Ford. Nick Kristof, writing at the New York Times, has issued a list of proposals, and there are a lot of good ideas here that Trump ought to listen to. Invest in a huge rollout of free testing so that we know who is sick. In South Korea, the number of people who've been tested is exponentially higher than in the United States. Cancel large gatherings. They're doing that, except Broadway shows are still going on. Expand telemedicine so patients can get advice while they're at home. Plan for hospitals to be overwhelmed, as happened in China, Iran, and northern Italy. Epidemiological models suggest that by late April, we could have millions of Americans infected. We could easily see 100 million infections of the new coronavirus in the United States. About 5 to 10% might require hospitalization, and 1% might need a ventilator. That could mean almost 1 million people needing ventilators, though we only have about 72,000 full ventilators in the entire country. He proposes to cancel vacations for health workers and provide military medics to assist in ERs if needed. Make plans in case first responders, like clusters of firefighters, become sick in large numbers. Congress should promptly pass legislation, shamefully stalled for 16 years, mandating paid sick leave for all workers. And he says instead of bailing out airlines or cruise lines, and by the way, cruise lines announced they are going to shut down for at least 30 days. Kristof says make people in quarantine eligible for unemployment insurance and waive work requirements for benefit programs. Don't let struggling families become homeless because they suddenly can't make the rent or meet mortgage payments. And here in California, several municipalities have passed temporary bans on evictions for failure to pay the rent. Now, the panic on Wall Street is evident. The 20% drop in the markets, and it went down today, and then it was kind of bouncing back up. And bizarrely, Rush Limbaugh was acting like his commentary on his nationwide radio show was responsible for the recovery of the market. And he said he's so calm and rational that it calmed the markets today. Now, that's hallucination and delusion all rolled up into one. But I've linked to this analytical piece by Neil Irwin, a business reporter for the New York Times. And he says there's some weird things going on. Bond prices and stock prices were moving together over the past week, not in opposite directions like they usually do. There were reports from trading desks that many assets that are normally liquid, easy to buy and sell, were freezing up, including gold. So what he concludes, all this suggests that major financial players are experiencing a cash crunch and are selling whatever they can as a result. The volatility in markets in the last few weeks reflects the deep uncertainty about the near future of the world economy. But for now, it is being compounded by something strange happening just beneath the surface, creating ripples like the ones that were evident Wednesday. Well, the Federal Reserve announced today that it's injecting $1.5 trillion into markets to quell investor panic. 3 blocks of $500 billion will be injected into the market over the next few days. Now, I'm not qualified to comment on whether this is a rational thing to do, but I just want to make this comparison, that the Fed can cough up $1.5 trillion on very short notice. But we're told we can't have Medicare for all because it would cost $3.5 trillion a year and save us $0.5 trillion over projected costs of total health care over the next 10 years. We can always find money to bail out Wall Street and to fund the Pentagon, but never the human needs. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Keita Tom from Corvallis, Oregon, mailed in a check recently to renew her subscription and a little extra. Thank you very much, Keita. And she notes that I have always pronounced her name correctly. Unlike our friend John Zwiebel in Hawaii, who I initially called Zweibel, because that's just the way phonetically it appeared to me. He sends in $10 the first of every month, and I appreciate John very much. Also want to mention Paul Elsesser, one of our longest and most generous contributor, who lands a check in my P.O. box every month on the first of the month. And if you want to join these people, all you have to do is visit my website, peterbcollins.com, click on menu, click on Become a Subscriber, you'll hit the sign-up page, and I think you'll know what to do. You can choose the level of support that's comfortable for you. If you prefer to use the U.S. mail, address it to my P.O. Box, number 150-660, San Rafael, California, 94915. So I have real mixed feelings about this. Trump he's threatening to do something that is the right move, but as usual, for the wrong reason. The background? Democrats and Republicans are scrambling to preserve the domestic surveillance operations in this country, and they want to extend the FISA bill, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, as amended. The USA Freedom Act is what it's also called. And it will lapse on Sunday if they don't get a bill on Trump's desk by tomorrow afternoon. So you've got Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy, staunch opponents, working hand in hand to extend this. Jerry Nadler, Democrat chair of the Judiciary Committee, along with his counterpart from Intelligence, Adam Schiff, they're gung-ho. They want this renewed without any amendments, no changes. And here comes Trump to say, well, I don't like the FISA court because they approved the wiretap orders on Carter Page, the former Trump campaign schlub who got caught up in the Russiagate investigation. And as you know, I believe there should be no FISA court. It is absolutely inappropriate in our system of government. A secret court with secret presentations and secret rulings and secret warrants that are issued. But Trump only cares about how it has affected him, not many other people who have been harmed by the murky actions of the FISA court and by the laws that enable warrants that don't require judicial approval to collect business records, the surveillance of our call records. It's a little more difficult for the government than it used to be, but it's 3 clicks instead of 2. And I want to recommend the coverage of the World Socialist website. They describe it. The House of Representatives voted to extend key provisions of the FISA law and reauthorize government spying on the public. It's now headed for the Senate and then to the president's desk. In the House, majorities of Democrats and Republicans supported passage. And so our calls to restore the Fourth Amendment, to stop spying on Americans in the United States, fall on deaf ears in both parties. And it's a travesty. It truly is. Also facing a presidential veto is the resolution that came out of the Senate and was passed yesterday by the House 227 to 186, and it would block or attempt to block any military action against Iran without approval from Congress. Now, I completely support this, but Trump will definitely veto it. Chelsea Manning, who has spent now almost 10 months behind bars on a bogus contempt charge for her refusal to testify before the WikiLeaks grand jury, she attempted to kill herself yesterday at the federal lockup in Alexandria, Virginia. I can understand she feels hopelessness. She feels that nobody cares. You haven't heard a single political elected official in this country decry the treatment that she has received and the mounting fines, now totaling nearly $500,000 for her principled refusal to testify. They already got everything out of her in the court-martial. And yet the government continues to press her. She has a hearing on Friday, but this judge is unlikely to provide any relief as far as I can see. Well, it's good news and a little better news, I guess. They have moved the two-man debate between Biden and Sanders from Phoenix to Washington. There will be no audience on Sunday's debate. And in general, I think that's a good thing. Also, Jorge Ramos, the far right-wing anchor for Univision, he's been sidelined because he was in proximity with someone who tested positive for coronavirus. He would have given Bernie a real hard time. We would have heard about Cuba and Castro and Castro and Cuba. But he'll be replaced by Univision's news anchor Elia Calderon, and we'll see if she is more fair-minded. Joe Biden has shuffled his campaign and hired Jennifer O'Malley Dillon as his new campaign manager. She formerly worked for Beto O'Rourke's presidential campaign and was a top advisor on the 2012 re-election effort of Barack Obama. Our friend Stephen Zunis, professor of politics at the University of San Francisco, is quoted in a story headlined "Joe Biden's hawkish positions seen as major liability among liberals." And Zunis is quoted here as saying, "I think the biggest vulnerability is not what Trump and the Republicans might throw at him, but this bloody battle with the left wing of the party. It's going to alienate a lot of potential voters," said Zunis. "Even those who vote for him are going to be less likely to contribute money or campaign for him. It's going to hurt him among Democrats who are considerably more anti-interventionist than Biden is." Now on to some of the coverage of Bernie Sanders today. I highly recommend a piece at Salon.com under the byline of Keith A. Spencer. And he went to a social scientist who evaluated hundreds of thousands of political tweets in the past year or so, looking for the Bernie bros. And it appears to be a complete myth, because when you look at and they use these evaluating systems about what's called sentiment analysis, and it's essentially a way of trying to graph or to come up with a tangible way of reflecting the virulence of an opinion. And first of all, you should know that one of the reasons the Bernie bros loom so large is that Bernie Sanders has so many Twitter followers. He has more than any other Democratic candidate. Sanders, almost 18 million. Warren is next with merely 8.2 million. Biden has only 4.8 million people following him on Twitter. So this creates the illusion that Bernie bros are more ubiquitous, and when one of them is a combative or extreme or uses a snake emoji, it is generalized to smear the entire body of Sanders reporters. So asking the expert here, did your opinion change after doing this analysis? Yes, I had believed that Bernie's followers are more likely to like him because they're more likely to experience the very negative life circumstances that Bernie Sanders wants to fix. People in a negative situation are more likely to interact negatively with people, particularly those anonymous online people that they have no in-person relationship with. So I had anticipated that Bernie's followers on average would have a much higher chance to be negative. This does not appear to be the case, or at least not as much as the claims I read on Twitter, political media reports, and on TV. Then there's a great op-ed at The Guardian today under the byline of Nathan Robinson. He is a young attorney from New Orleans, and he refers to the myth that Joe Biden is more electable than Bernie Sanders. It's a myth, just as it was a myth that Hillary Clinton was a good candidate against Trump. Biden is not, in fact, the pragmatic choice. He would not beat Trump. He would lose. And we must say this over and over again. Forget his flubs, his finger nibbling. Biden would be crushed by Trump. If you want Trump out of office, don't support Biden. I mean, this guy's pretty clear, wouldn't you say? Last time around, Clinton supporters lived in a strange kind of denial. Anyone could see she had unique vulnerabilities Trump could exploit. A Wall Street candidate, while he was running to drain the swamp. She was under investigation by the FBI, his pitch that Washington was corrupt. And he continues. He notes the Ukraine scandal, which is far worse for Biden electorally than usually acknowledged, and he recites some of the details here. And basically, in his view, he absolves Biden of any, wrongdoing. He says, but the important question is, does it sound good? And the answer is no. It sounds terrible. One more quote. His slogan is no malarkey, but since Biden himself is a longtime spewer of malarkey, Trump will successfully paint Biden as a hypocrite. I think you can tell I agree with Mr. Robinson. I've also linked to an interesting report from Glenn Ford, the editor of the Black Agenda Report, who tries to explain to guys like me why black voters have so uniformly fallen in line for Joe Biden. And he writes, black people don't vote their own political convictions in Democratic primaries. They give their votes to candidates they believe are the best bet to defeat the white man's party. With such a strategy, black folks almost never win in terms of getting an office holder who thinks as they do, but they're content to avoid losing catastrophically to the worst crackers. Black voters are aware of Biden's many transgressions against them, and that's what white moderates do. Older blacks have convinced themselves that a white moderate is needed to flush the overtly white racist Trump from power. Black voters support Sanders' agenda, which very much resembles a black political center of gravity that decades of polling has shown is far to the left of the white political spectrum. In fact, majorities of the very voters that awarded sweeping victories to Biden in the March 3rd Super Tuesday primaries told exit pollsters that they support a single government health insurance plan for all, the very definition of Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all. There's more to the piece, and I encourage you to check it out. And here's one that is a long read. I printed it out, 32 pages from The Atlantic. And McKay Coppins does a deep dive on the tools and schemes that Brad Parscale and the Trump re-election campaign are poised to deploy. And he describes how they create a lot of noise, they promote their alternative facts to audiences who do not trust or even absorb the mainstream media these days. They talk about the command center in suburban Washington and the use of micro-targeting that was started by Obama, but taken to new levels by the Trump campaign with help from Cambridge Analytica and the dark and careful micro-targeting that they made available. So there's a great deal in this piece, and I recommend it to you when you have time to sit back and peruse it. Vox is declaring that Bernie Sanders is the winner of the California primary, and the current tally does show him with a strong lead. Biden has 27.6%, and Bernie is at 34.2%. And we still do have, let's see here, 1.645 million ballots remaining to be counted. A couple of other interesting numbers, both Elizabeth Warren at 13% and Mike Bloomberg at 12.9% never had any chance of claiming delegates here in California, where, by the way, we had about a 50% turnout for the primary election. I want to thank John Lefrancois, who is a listener, and he sometimes corresponds with me. And he sent me an alarming screenshot that shows at 2-minute intervals the vote count in the state of Michigan this past Tuesday. Now, I want to share this with you because I don't have a way to scan this or insert it into the podcast. But at 10:07 p.m. Eastern Time, Joe Biden was trailing Bernie Sanders 52 to 41%. At that point, Bernie Sanders was showing 728,000 votes from Michigan. 2 minutes later, they showed that the vote tally increased from 60.13 to 60.21%. Joe Biden's tally went up by 404 votes. Bernie Sanders' tally went down by over 303,000. Now, there is no plausible explanation for this. Vote tallies do not decline. We've been given no information about mistakes, about miscalculations, about errors, uncounted ballots. I cannot think of any rational way that Sanders would suddenly show a loss of 303,000 votes. And our buddy Mark Crispin Miller, professor of media at NYU, he sent out an email rant today. Why is Bernie still refusing to say anything at all about his unlikeliest defeats in Iowa, Massachusetts, and elsewhere? Does he think it would make him look like a sore loser? And he refers to a New York Times article which basically has already declared Bernie an aggrieved loser, and I'll get to that in a moment. Let me be blunt about the man whom I've supported with some misgivings. Bernie's failure to say anything about election rigging is especially contemptible because he now has cited the failure of young voters to turn out for him. And Miller suggests that Sanders doesn't really know why the results from young voters are so low. How does he know that many of them didn't try to vote or had their votes erased or flipped or fractionalized by the election gremlins? Now, I understand the questions he's raising, but what we know about voter participation is based on exit polls. Now, it's fair to say that you wouldn't participate in an exit poll if you had been refused a ballot when you showed up at the polling place. But I think there are a lot of other questions that need to be explored. But I do support Miller's thrust, which is that we do have to call out anomalies and potential election fraud when we see it. Bernie Sanders has never been good about that, and he's maintaining that posture today. Now to the naysayers and those who take special pleasure in prematurely declaring that Bernie Sanders' campaign is dead. David Siders at Politico says, in every way other than mathematically, his presidential campaign is done. Now, I would submit that the math is pretty significant here. Only about half or a little less than half of the delegates have been assigned so far. And while it's an uphill climb, there's no doubt about it, it isn't completely over. It has not been definitively decided. But that doesn't stop the Bernie bashing coming from the corporate media. So they quote a Barack Obama campaign aide named Doug Herman. The window is closing for Bernie. Losing states he won last time in a scenario where he's got a clean head-to-head two-man race is pretty damning for his candidacy. The most crucial barometer for him is, has he expanded his coalition? And time after time, we see that he hasn't. Well, I think that is a fair calculation so far. But if Sanders pulls an upset in the debate on Sunday, if Joe Biden shows up incoherent, which would not be totally a surprise, then things could shift as they have dramatically shifted so far. And they belatedly quote Jeff Cohen, co-founder of RootsAction.org and a Sanders supporter. The movement doesn't go away after this week. It doesn't go away after the November election. Cohen said he's not throwing in the towel yet. But we do acknowledge the challenge here. Then there's a widely quoted article, and the one that Mark Crispin Miller referred to from 2 days ago in the New York Times, byline Reed J. Epstein. And he selectively looks at this political cycle and declares that Bernie Sanders is an aggrieved outsider. He cites Sanders' complaints. The corporate media didn't pay attention to his agenda. Well, the media alternated between blacking out Bernie. Just do a search about MSNBC and look at the huge gaps in when he was invited to appear there, and the smears that were routinely presented without any commentary from a supporter of Sanders. The electability issue, the Cuban smears, so many others. So this diatribe continues, that basically he labels him an aggrieved outsider. Through Tuesday's voting, his theory of the election has not proven true. That is accurate. But this isn't. So when Buttigieg and Klobuchar dropped out of the race and endorsed Biden, to the Sanders camp, it wasn't because they'd won next to no support from black voters and run out of money. It was part of an establishment plot. Well, I suspect there was back-channel communication. Is that a plot? Well, it could be. And we may someday find out the machinations that occurred after the Nevada primary and up to Super Tuesday. So I'm not going to quote any further from this. It's just annoying rehash. Let's go to Jennifer Rubin, the ever-reliable occupant of the Washington Post's Stop Bernie desk. Here's her venom today. It should surprise no one who watched the 2016 primary that Bernie Sanders, after getting drubbed for the second consecutive week and losing every county in Mississippi, Missouri, and Michigan, should decide to stay in the race, pursuing a hopeless campaign and taking money from his supporters. It's what he does. Wow. She has just been consistently attacking Sanders in the most negative way. Here's a dig. The senator's online mob continues to spread disinformation about Biden. His own staff calls Biden corrupt and makes false allegations regarding Biden's efforts to cut Social Security, which are accurate. But Jennifer Rubin doesn't buy that, and so she just dismisses it. She then says that Sanders remaining in the race could lead him to negotiate with Biden if Biden is declared the winner. And she says it's not clear why the Biden camp should give Sanders anything. Well, that's just more repetition of the bad playbook from 2016, because after she secured the nomination, Hillary Clinton demanded that Bernie Sanders go out and campaign for her. He did 39 stops. But he couldn't tell his supporters that Hillary had moved in the direction of $15 minimum wage, Wall Street reform, Medicare for all, any of these signature policies that Bernie advanced. And if Joe Biden does that again, tries to force the party to unite without offering anything to the Sanders wing of the party, the Sanders-Warren wing of the party, well, as I said yesterday, Trump may lose, but Biden is not going to beat him. It's simply not in the cards. And finally today, you can cement the title president together with Vladimir Putin for the foreseeable future, because he has turned the machinery of government in the Kremlin, a 383-0 vote to remove term limits so that Vladimir Putin, age 67 today, could serve continuously until he is 84. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it all over the place. You'll find it on YouTube, and I'm still Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.